Welcome everyone to the first ever DuneCon. I am Fredrik, the CEO and co-founder of Dune, and I'm going to kick this day off by telling you a little bit about why the data must flow. And we're gathered here in Berlin, and Berlin and crypto has a rich history together. For instance, the Ethereum protocol was launched out of Berlin a little over 7 years ago, July 2015. And as you know, this is not just any other day for the Ethereum protocol, and we're here together in Berlin. So you probably know this already, but you could also check on Dune. Have we merged? Yes, we have merged. So congratulations, everyone. The world's biggest smart contract blockchain is now secured by proof of stake. What a massive, massive milestone for this space, for Ethereum, and for anyone working in crypto. And I couldn't be more excited to spend this day together with you in Berlin to celebrate. So, not only is Berlin an important city for crypto, it's an important city for Dune. And as you embarrassingly saw on this video, me and this other guy, Mats, started this company called Dune almost exactly 4 years ago out of Oslo, Norway. And we tried to get into a few accelerators, didn't really work out, but we also quickly figured that we basically have no potential customers up in our little country of Norway. So about 1 week in, we realized we need to do something, go somewhere to find the right people. And we realized there was a hackathon in Berlin called Eat Berlin that we figured this is where all the exciting folks are. We need to get there. It was sold out, but we applied some hustle. We had $3,000 in the company, which is the minimum amount you need to start a company in Norway. And we spent about 1,000 of it to go and get last-minute tickets on a plane to Berlin and hit Eat Berlin. That was 2 weeks into our history, and that was the start of a fruitful relationship between Dune and the city of Berlin. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense for us to bring all of you, the Dune community, to Berlin today. So, welcome to Berlin, everybody. We can't wait for all of you to meet each other, hang out, have a good time, celebrate the merge, talk about data. We have a fantastic program filled with plenty of wizards, and most of the time today is going to be on the stage for wizards. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about why are we even here? Why bother to get into this room, to be together, and to talk about all of this data? So, if we zoom out and we ask, how does the world progress? How does things become better for people? Why is it probably better to be living today than 50 years ago or 100 years ago? This is something economists have studied a lot, and it's a bit of a tricky question. But we do know that people tend to move to countries where there's more economic growth, and higher GDP. So that's, in some shape or form, a measure of something people want. So how does that come about? Well, there's this equation that economists are working on, and it basically says something like, you take some labor, you take some capital, then there's this magical other component, and then you get this beautiful thing that is economic growth. This is called the Solow residual by legendary economist Robert Solow, who has been doing a lot of research on economic growth. But another way to think about that is simply innovation. Innovation is this magical component of the economic growth equation that somehow happens and really transforms the world. And while the economists can't really put numbers on it or quantify it, we have some ideas. So there's an amazing book called How Innovation Works by Matt Ridley, where he studies this deeply. Under what assumptions and under what circumstances does innovation thrive? And basically what he finds is that innovation must have a dynamic and open economy in which new companies, upstarts, and outsiders can challenge the status quo. That is how you get innovation, to have those aspects. And so let's think a little bit about our financial system, the traditional financial system, aka TradFi. So think about our friend Harold here, who's a programmer and has a fantastic idea on how to improve finance. It's actually a pretty simple idea, and it only takes a couple of hundred lines of code. So it's done in no time. However, since he's building in TradFi, he needs to ask for permission. And so he has to put on his suit, his tie, and go to the bank, to the regulators, to these seemingly friendly folks here, and try to get access. This is a closed system. It is by default not possible to get in. And you have to fight for your right to be part of it, whether that's as building or a user. And so there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of yeses you need to get to do anything at all. And there's a lot of incentives to give no's. And there's a lot of power for the people that say no. So this makes this very, very hard. Furthermore, it's a very, very slow system. It's based on decades-old technology. And if you just think about, banks like to think of themselves as technology companies, but no other technology product has a user experience where you click a button, and what happens is it says, oh, sorry, it's Christmas, so this is going to take you 2 days. That's not how technology works, but that's how bank works. And so this is an extremely slow system full of friction. And furthermore, it's local. So everything you do is within a local area. You have a group by country, which is kind of weird in these modern times when we can actually interact, do these events easily organized across the world, but financially, everything is local. So all this means that essentially the way traditional finance sort of looks at this definition of innovation is something like this. You're left out of the room if you really want to, have a dynamic and open economy, you want to challenge the status quo, have new upstarts. That is absolutely not the case in this world. And furthermore, if we think about the evolution of different technologies, so let's say communication, and you think about over time what has happened, and on the y-axis what value has been created. Way back, hundreds of years ago, you would send letters. You would write on a piece of paper, put it in the mail, someone will physically move it to another location where someone else can look at it. That's how we did it for a long time, relatively inefficient. Then someone came along and created a fax machine, which means your letter can magically appear at the receiver's end, which is obviously quite a bit better. And then we got email, which was even more efficient and even more convenient. It's basically the same format as the letter, but it goes way faster and it's way easier to use. But what really, really changed the game up for communication was this thing called the internet, where anyone can program and move information around in a flexible, open way. And if we go back to the world of finance and we think about what has the world of finance brought us, well, same diagram, and we say, okay, how did you do money before? Well, you went into the bank. You physically stepped up to the bank and put some money in. You could send it, you could save it, these things. Very, very cumbersome. And then eventually we got the internet and these things, and you could eventually do banking online. So you can go in your browser on your desktop and you can send money and these things. And then a little bit further down the line, we also got mobile banking. So you could send money around from your phone. And at best, I would say this is comparable to email. There are still a lot of frictions in this system. But at best, we've gotten what we had all the way back, just in a bit more convenience, a bit quicker, and a bit more accessible. And the reason why we're all here is because we now have this beautiful new thing, which is blockchains, which represent the internet of finance and allow anyone to build in a global infrastructure and move value, trust around the world. This is a massive paradigm shift and incredibly, incredibly exciting. So in that world, we all know it's important. What about data? What is data up in all of this? And let's talk about that. So we do know that data is important. You hear these things like data is the new oil, all of these different metrics on like how X data was created recently versus like ever back in history, and this is what it's all about. And that is true. It is really, really valuable and really important. But it's also inherently siloed and closed. So all data is essentially created on private servers, within private companies, within teams. And if you think about it, there's a lot of data, as we hear about all the time, but a lot of that data is just consumed by a very, very limited amount of people inside closed-wall organizations. And that inevitably means that knowledge is contained and limited, because data is only valuable if you can turn it into knowledge. And so all of this data is out there, but there's only a small amount of people that can actually reap the benefits of this data. So if we then turn around to our world of blockchains, what is a blockchain? Well, a blockchain is essentially a shared public backend that just lives out there, a virtual computer that anyone can build on. So our good friend Harold can simply show up and deploy some code to it, which is obviously a very powerful and beautiful thing. But there's also this aspect that anyone can analyze it, which is a massive paradigm shift. So you can not only build, but you can also look into and make sense of all of this data. And that's why we're saying that the revolution will not be reported quarterly. And historically, if you think about just the operational metrics of any business or company, most of it is private. So most of it, no one can see at all, because most companies are private. There's a select few processes or companies that go to this very hard process of becoming a public company. It's getting increasingly hard to do it, but some end up doing it. And then their information is public, but it is left in a PDF file shared once a quarter. So it's highly abstracted. It's very rare that you actually get to look at it. And then, of course, we have this world of crypto, where we have real-time open data. And what does that mean in practice? So say you, for whatever reason, are interested in the data from a bank. So say you, for instance, is this guy named Jamie Dimon. And you might be interested in, since you're the CEO of JP Morgan, you might be interested in, well, how's this bank doing? What risks exist in our system? What exposures do we have? What revenues do we have? What costs do we have? And of course, I don't know this because this is not public, but he's probably looking at some kind of dashboard, some kind of streamlined piece of information that comes to him to answer these questions. And so he's somewhat well-informed. But I would actually argue, there are other types of bank, like MakerDAO. And I would argue that this guy, Anon Crypto Pepe, on the interwebs, has probably better access to information about this system that he's interested in than this guy, Jamie. Because he can go and look real time into whatever happens in the Maker system. He can look at the balance sheet. He can look at the assets, the exposures, everything that's moving. He can write a few lines of SQL, and he can see all of this in real time. And he can work together with everybody else in the world to look at this. So this is quite powerful, and this is how the world works today. Pepe here represents anyone with an internet connection. Jamie Dimon represents only himself. So let's also think about startup world. So say, you have a Web2 Harold. He wants to do a startup. He has a brilliant idea for a new product he wants to build. So he goes ahead, writes some code, get himself a t-shirt, a cup with his face on, and creates a wonderful new startup. And initially, it's like working kind of well. The metrics are a little bit up, and it's exciting. But unfortunately, eventually, it falls off a cliff. It turns out that the demand wasn't really there. People didn't really want this. And he has to shut down the company and become sad. But what is actually the case is that maybe 100 people, 100 heralds, did this before him. A year ago, someone tried the exact same thing, and that company died for the exact same reason. And he simply couldn't know. That knowledge is lost in time. And this happens all the time. People start companies that, there's actually knowledge out there about why this didn't work, but people do this over and over. It's an enormous waste of human resourcefulness. But then contrast that with Web3 Herald, on the other hand, that has this open blockchain he can work on. He can also see all the products that were ever built. He can see the smart contracts, he can see the code, but he can also see the data. He can see how those products turn into traction or not. And he can analyze all that way back. He can consider a new segment he wants to enter into, and he can look at the competition. He can look at the products, he can look at the competition that he will face and what the traction is today. And this is, of course, a huge deal. It really makes a difference if you want to start a company. And so in the traditional startup world, there's a lot of talk about product feedback loops. You need to build something, you need to learn, you get some data, and then you can iterate. This is what it's all about, how to get the startup off the ground. But crucially, these feedback loops are private. Like this, only for like a few select engineers and product managers and whoever does this can see this and learn this. While in crypto, we essentially have an industry-wide feedback loop, which is fantastic. Anyone can learn all the things that anyone ever learned, and you can go as deep as you want. You can write open SQL on any data and figure out what happened previously. And so if you go back to how innovation works, innovation must have a dynamic and open economy. And basically, open data makes blockchains the most dynamic and open economy of anything we've ever seen before. So that also goes for investing. It means you can build way, way more efficiently, but you can also invest way more efficiently because you know what the traction is, what this looks like. You can have so much more knowledge about what's been going on. And that makes all of this move way, way faster. You have this industry-wide feedback loop, and what we're trying to do at Dune is to speed up the evolution of the revolution, meaning making all of this data accessible, making all of this a practical reality for anyone with an internet connection, and unleash and compound the knowledge that exists in the world, in this room, but all over, to let people learn and build and understand and push this industry forward to enable innovation. But crucially, Dune is not only the team building this tool. Dune is a data tool and a community. That's how I think about it. These are crucially important to function together, and they rely on each other. And us folks working on the Dune tool, all we care about is you guys that use this tool. And we want to empower you, enable you, give you clout, give you a career, get you paid, all the things you deserve, and enable you as much as we can. That's all we think about. And this is hugely important for us. And we really think that we're achieving this mission together, not us as the builder of the tool. And that is why we're so incredibly excited for today, that we, for the first time, can get all of you together to hang out. And I want to say a little bit about the Dune culture and the wizard culture specifically, because I think this is a very rare thing, and one of the things I'm most proud of with Dune is the culture in the Dune community. So, for one, there's a lot of focus on learning. And people, I check our Discord every day, and every day I see people coming in, trying to learn something new, trying to build a query. Many, many people in the Dune community, even on top of the leaderboard, including me, are not programmers by education, but have learned SQL within 4 Dune. And really has rolled up their sleeves and tried to figure this thing out. Fork some queries, play around, you learn a bit. And this is hard work, but you're doing it. And not just like popping by, trying to make a quick buck and then fucking off. You're staying, right? And furthermore, you're paying it forward. When you've learned something, people help each other out, which is also a fantastically beautiful thing. People have a spirit where they show each other how to do it. When you've learned something, you pass it on and let the next person become better, which is fantastic. And furthermore, obviously, throughout this year, the crypto space has fallen a little bit. Prices are way, way down. But nevertheless, wizard activity stays strong, which is also incredibly impressive in a space where a lot of things come and go very quickly. Wizards stick around and build together. This is all something I'm incredibly proud of. So, we usually do all of this on the interwebs. And we have fun. We're in Discord, Telegram, Twitter, all of these places on the interwebs. But as you hopefully know, real life hits a little differently. So today, it's incredibly exciting to be able to put some faces to the avatars and actually hang out with people in real life, have a coffee, have a beer, hang out, chat. This is very important, and this is why this day matters so, so much. So, but before we get to all the wizards, I've essentially now told you why the data must flow. And before we go on, we want to talk a little bit about how the data will flow. And as you saw in the video in the beginning, it was a little hard for us to get money in the beginning, so we ended up being just me and the other guy in the video for about 2 or so years. And eventually, people started getting a little bit impressed that, like, oh, this thing is actually kind of working and making sense. And when they learned then that we're only 2 people working on it, they got a little bit mind blown. We're like, oh, okay, wow. But they got even more mind blown when they heard that I'm just a dumb economist, while this other guy is the only engineer in this company. And basically, what happened in the early days of Dune was that this guy built things, he built features, he built data sets all across the board, did customer support. And what I kept thinking was, I saw this work, we got a new feature, something, and I was thinking, boy, this is a wizard. This is a true wizard here. And essentially, that's the seed of the phrase wizard. And I will now hand it over to the OG wizard, my co-founder and Dune CTO, Mats.